What up, guys? The Bench Buddies are back with our college football preview and picks for this week, week 7. As always, I have Ty joining me here to break down this week's best games. But before we get into it, hit that subscribe button down below to be entered in our giveaway at 500 subscribers. We'll talk about last week's games. A lot of struggling for us from normal weeks. If you've seen our previous videos, not a good week for us here. Obviously, you got me by one game, but plain and simple, I'll start it here. Best game of the week had to be the Texas-Oklahoma game, just because back and forth, the what ifs, what could have happened and whatnot. And Oklahoma walks out victorious, and obviously you see them already a top 5 team in the country. But besides that game, Ty, what was probably the biggest surprise and then the biggest, game as well?
I don't even know if it's a surprise at this point, but I'll point to the Notre Dame game. I think it was probably the most influential outside of the Red River game just because it fully eliminated Notre Dame. And if you look at Louisville's schedule, not to mention they played really well against Notre Dame, but they have a very easy schedule to finish, and they could very well be 12-0, setting up a showdown with Florida State in the ACC championship. I know that seems like a stretch, but the schedule is pretty favorable for them. So that'll be interesting to see.
And so we'll start it here Friday night, right when you guys are seeing this video. Tulane, Memphis, a big game for both of these teams here in the American Conference. And whoever wins this is more than likely going to be the favorite to win this conference. And I think that's going to be the green wave of Tulane. They had a great year last year and it carried over into this year. And they're favorites on the road, which must mean something. And I'm going with Tulane here to get the win.
Yeah, I'm going Memphis in the upset here. I think a lot of people are still high on Tulane after their finish last year, rightfully so. But Memphis is still a solid team in the American, and I think playing at home in the night game atmosphere is going to be just enough here.
Then moving over to Saturday, we got our Wolverines at home, favored by 33 points against a Big Ten team, which is kind of unheard of these days here. And that just speaks to the volumes of how good Michigan is this year. I expect them to absolutely blow them out of the water. Another good performance from McCarthy. And this defense of Michigan has been exceptional in the second half. And they are the reason that JJ McCarthy probably won't win the Heisman this year is because the defense is so good. He doesn't have to play in the third and even the fourth quarter for him to pad his stats if he wanted to.
Yeah, I agree. This game it's supposed to be cold and rainy, I believe, the whole game. So I think the 33 might be a lot. I would not be surprised if Indiana covered. This feels like a 31-3 type of game for Michigan where they just grind them out on the ground. I don't see Indiana really doing anything on offense. Their offense has really struggled when they're not playing this Michigan defense. So this week, I don't really see them moving the ball at all. I think Michigan will have no trouble.
And then on Peacock, when you guys turn that game off because it's a blowout, you'll turn it to this one, which is probably going to be closer than you thought because we know we've seen it. Purdue has given Ohio State fits, whether it's at home or on the road in the shoe. Purdue somehow, some way finds themselves in close games heading into the fourth quarter. I think Purdue covers here, but Ohio State just has too much talent and they're starting to figure things out here on offense. And I think they go in there and get the win.
Yeah, I'm a little surprised at this line. Purdue has not been great this year. I know it's tough going on the road, but I think maybe people are thinking Purdue tests Ohio State's secondary, but outside of that, Ohio State has the advantage everywhere, and I think their offense is going to have a big day on the road.
And then moving to 3:30, Florida, South Carolina. I think both disappointment so far for these teams. And this is a big game, especially for Florida if they want to hang around in the SEC. For South Carolina, they're just hoping they can get to 6-6 and get bowl eligible. But I don't think that's going to be a step in that direction. I think Florida is going to stay in the SEC race here and get that win on the road.
Yeah, I was actually high on South Carolina to start the year, but they've been really disappointing so far, and I think it continues here. Florida's got a couple good wins this year. I think their Billy Napier era is going to continue to point in the right direction here, and they'll get a road win.
And this game for me could have been the other way around. It might have went the Aggies if they would have won last week, but they didn't beat Bama at home. And if you can't win those games at home, what makes me believe that you're going to go into Rocky Top and get a win? I don't think that's going to happen. I think Tennessee and Joe Milton, they're looking to fight back and claw their way back up these rankings after that Florida loss. And it's definitely possible. It's all out in front of them. They have Georgia on their schedule, so if they somehow pull off that upset, this A&M team stands no chance, and I think the Volunteers here, this is the game where it starts and it matters the most for them.
Yeah, I agree. I think they're going to get back on track here to where we thought they would be at the start of the season. I think Texas A&M had a lot of chances last week. I think that game was really there for the taking for them to pull that upset. And I was just not impressed with how they played in the second half. I think that's going to carry over this week, and Tennessee is going to get a big win at home. And A&M is just going to be more question marks.
And in my opinion, the biggest game of the week, possibly the year so far, Oregon and Washington. And I'm going with Washington because Michael Penix Jr. is going to win this Heisman this year. Right now, he is the favorite to win the Heisman. And I've said it since week one after his big performance that he is bound to win the Heisman. And I got to stick with my gut here on this one. But Bo Nix, he's built for these games with Oregon, but it seems like he can't show up when it matters most in these type of games for Oregon. So I got to go here with Washington at home. And maybe if this game was flipped, if it was in Eugene this year, I'd go with the Ducks.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a really, really fun game to watch. I think it's going to be maybe even above that high over under. I think it's going to be a shootout and a very close game that comes down to the end. I'm just giving a slight edge to the home team in Washington. I think Penix has played just a little bit better than Bo Nix this year, although they're both phenomenal so far. But I think Washington's going to get this huge win at home. If it was in Eugene, I'd probably go the other way, but unfortunately for Oregon, it's not.
Then at 7, a game I don't think you were expecting to see on here, Wyoming and Air Force. And, we had the Wyoming game last week on here. Now we got him again on here. And this game is going to probably decide the Mountain West standings for quite a bit here. Air Force getting favored by 10.5 is very surprising to me, but that just speaks volumes about how good this Air Force team is. And if they win this game this week, which we both think they are, it's kind of hard for me to imagine them not being ranked at this point next week. And I think that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, I think it's just a letdown for Wyoming. They pulled that upset last week of Fresno State, and now they immediately have to go back on the road to take on a really good Air Force team. I think it just has a letdown written all over it, and I think Air Force wins the defensive struggle here.
And then a battle of the borders, Missouri and Kentucky. And yeah, Missouri struggled in their last two, but they're going to get back on track here. And Brady Cook, obviously, or their last game last week, as it should say 5-1. But Missouri, Brady Cook and company, they were in that game against LSU. And I know it looks like it was bad because they lost by 10, but that pick six at the end didn't really factor into it. And so he could have led this team down the field and possibly escaped with a win. And you could have had a 6-0 versus 5-0 team here. But the Tigers are going to prevail, beat the Wildcats, and hand them their second losses. They should be 5-1 as well.
Yeah, I think Missouri did show a lot last week, even in their loss, a lot more than Kentucky showed because they just laid down and let Georgia run all over them. And basically, Mark Stoops came out and said, "We don't have the players to compete this year." So, what makes you think they're going to compete with this Missouri offense this week? I just don't see it. I think Missouri is going to get a big road win and continue their bounce back season here.
Then this game is going to be possibly the biggest game for the ACC this year. Miami, North Carolina. And a lot of the media has said that Miami is going to go in there and take a knee to win this game. And I don't think that's going to happen. I think North Carolina and Drake May are just too much for this defense. And Georgia Tech, obviously, yeah, the situation that happened last week and so on and so forth. But them losing to Georgia Tech, one of the worst teams in the ACC, even it being that competitive at home, sits in the back of my mind. And I just don't think Miami is built for these games yet with Mario Cristobal.
Yeah, I think that loss really took a lot out of Miami mentally, and I think you're going to see that this week. I mean, I think there's two ways they could go about it. They could have a huge bounce back performance, or they can kind of just lay down. I think it's going to be the latter, unfortunately. I just think that's such a devastating way to lose a game. It's really tough to bounce back from. So I think Drake May is going to have a big game, and North Carolina is going to continue their quiet, undefeated season.
And a game where a lot of people hoping at the beginning of the year this would be an undefeated matchup, but unfortunately the Irish have struggled here in these last few weeks, and they're going to pull off the upset to essentially eliminate USC from the college football playoff. And I say that because the defense of USC. It's finally gonna go against a worthy opponent that can dethrone them. Sam Hartman, obviously, last week struggled, 5 turnovers, and he's looking for a bounce back. And they still have something to prove. Like I'm not officially eliminating them from the playoff because there's a lot of teams that have to play each other. And possibly you could have possibly a 2-loss team make it. And I think if the Irish win out, they might be that best 2-loss team. So I'm going with the Irish here on that slim chance of hope.
Yeah, I think Notre Dame is built really well to beat a team like USC. I think they're going to run the ball well against that poor defense, keep the ball away from Caleb Williams. And I think their defense is playing really well and they can frustrate Williams. Obviously, Louisville kind of ran all over them last week, but USC doesn't have as much of a running game. It's pretty much all through the air for them. So I think Notre Dame, if they get USC frustrated early, that's going to be a big advantage. And I think they'll get the upset win and a bounce back.
Then at 8, NC State, Duke, and Duke's coming off of the bye. And before that, they lost to Notre Dame at home. And Riley Leonard is expected to play in this one, which is a huge boost for Duke. And I think they get that win at home, bounce back against a pretty solid NC State team.
Yeah, I think Duke's defense, even if Leonard's not 100%, which it sounds like he won't be, I think their defense is going to be enough here to get them through. They played really well against Clemson and Notre Dame already. I think that'll continue. NC State, they were not really impressive in their one big game against Notre Dame this year. So I don't have any confidence in them getting this road win.
And then the last game that we have for you this week, UCLA, Oregon State. And if DJ Uiagalelei can play how he did last week, then you might be looking at an 11-1, possibly 10-2 Oregon State team when this season is over, because that defense is legit, and that's saying a lot in the Pac-12. And we saw last week that they are capable of putting up 50 points. So if Oregon State can play last week how they did, same exact game plan, same everything into UCLA, then I think the Beavers walk away with a touchdown win.
Yeah, I agree. I'm actually surprised by this line here. Yeah, UCLA got that big win last week. I still think they're a year or two away from being towards the top of the Pac-12 or I guess the Big Ten in the next few years, but I do think they're at least 1 year away from contending for that. And I think that'll show this week. I think Oregon State's defense and the game being in Corvallis is going to be too much for UCLA to overcome here with their really young core.
That's going to be it for our preview and picks this week. Make sure you guys check back with us next week to see how we did for this week's picks. But until the next time, the Bench Buddies are out.